What's going on, everyone? Today I'm here with Dr. Roma Benjamin. Now, she runs literacy centers and also she is a pastor of a church as well. So I definitely want to thank her for joining us on the show today to speak about literacy. So, Dr. Benjamin, tell us how you started your literacy center.
Well, I actually am an educator. I was in the public school system in the city of one of the most, well, you could say the lowest in the state of Pennsylvania. And I realized as I was being the lead principal, the highest paid principal, that I was perpetuating failure. We were passing students that could not read. Children were graduating high school, couldn't read, and I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't say I'm making six figures. I couldn't do it. And so I just felt led of God to leave the public school system for the time being and to open literacy centers, to literally deal with eradicating illiteracy in the schools, in churches, in community centers, in daycares. And that's how this all started, right here in my church, and then dealing with different people across the country with this.
So let me ask you a question. Why do they pass children who can't pass the grade?
Well, Phil, part of the problem is the school is really not designed, especially for African Americans, Latinos, and especially the black male. It's just not designed to teach our children. You know, they claim that reading is the hardest thing to teach, and it is not. The real issue is they don't believe our children can learn how to read. If you go to school and you send your child to school every day, 5 days a week for almost 7 hours a day, and they still come out and cannot read, then we have a major problem. And it's not just a school problem, but it is a major problem. I was there. I was in the system. I was a teacher, a lead teacher. I did it all, taught from all grades, and was a principal on all levels. And you see it on a continuous basis that they socially promote the child because of age, but they never really go to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is that the majority of the children cannot read, especially on grade level and especially by third grade, because kindergarten to third grade is when you learn how to read. Fourth grade to and on is when you read to learn. So there's a big disconnect, and our children are not getting the fundamentals. Like you were saying earlier, you were taught that reading was fundamental. Well, first of all, it should be fun, and then you should have the basic components to literacy, how to know the sounds that the alphabet make. But that's not happening anymore. Phonics is not happening anymore. You know, intensive reading instruction is not happening anymore. And so that's the purpose of me creating literacy centers, to deal with it on a scale where parents can send their children to an environment that's smaller than the school system, because most of the kids get sucked up through, they get lost in the shuffle.
So you stated that the school system was not created for the education of the black children or other groups of children. Now, why is it that the black children are having a hard time reading, but the white children are getting it? How are they teaching it where black kids can't get it?
Well, part of the problem is, and I've seen it, you know, we're dealing with like a 400-year-old system that comes out of European teaching and Greek understanding. I watched the school system, a district, put in Shakespeare as their foundation of their reading program. Now, tell me the relevancy of Shakespeare for today if you can't connect it. You're dealing with satire and irony and tragedy and comedy, and you're dealing with different types of genre. And if you don't teach children the sounds of the alphabet, how the word is within the sentence, within the context of the sentence, then we struggle with our children. I've taught in the white schools as well. And we have white schools. I've talked with some very influential people, millionaires, and their children couldn't read either. The difference is their parents advocated and they fought for it. And they demanded that the school do what they were supposed to do. A lot of times we have more issues going on, but still the bottom line is, Phil, You can teach a child how to read. I don't care what the socioeconomic situation is, whether they have the living conditions, you still can teach a child how to read. And it's not that difficult. There has to be consistency in the urban black schools. It got to be consistent. You can't focus on the behavior, because most of the time, Phil, they say it's a behavior issue. It is not a major behavior issue. It is a literacy issue, and the children are illiterate, and it creates the behavior. The behavior is a result of the root of the problem.
So when you answered my question, basically you wasn't saying that Caucasians are smarter. You just basically said that their parents have more time to be after the school to say, look, you're not educating my kid. What's going on? And they're on them versus, let's say, some of the black parents who aren't doing that because their kids aren't learning. Is that basically what you're getting at?
That's what I'm getting at. I told you I've worked in both arenas. In the predominantly white schools, I worked in the predominantly white school in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Those parents constantly, because their children couldn't read either. Their children were struggling with phonics and phonemic awareness. Their children struggled with spelling and being able to write a sentence, a complete sentence. But they were constantly at the school. I've spoken with some very, very well off Caucasians right now that they give to my center, and they was explaining how their child couldn't read. They could read every fourth word, and when the mother found out about it, she went and addressed the school. The child was getting an A, but she couldn't pass the standardized test. So they found out what was going on. Of course, they have a lot of money, so they're going to investigate. They're going to invest in their child a little different. The child now is in college, working on her degree in education, especially in special education. Now, our parents, we struggle because we have to go through. The value of reading is not that great, Phil, to be honest, with our parents. A new pair of sneakers, or the latest jeans, or the latest haircut, or all the electronics seem to be more important to our parents than it is with a really firm reading program. Like, I had a parent who wanted her child in the program. The grandmother put her in, paid her because it's a minimum fee, and because of cheerleading, the child's in the second grade reading below kindergarten level because of cheerleading. I've had parents, because of football, they would rather do that instead of making sure that their child have what they need to survive, especially in this 21st century. Because if you can't read, the results. You've heard the stats that, the majority of our kids, they'll either be in jail or dead on the streets, drugs, or it's getting out of control as we speak.
It really is. So you feel that if we were to create schools within the black community, you feel that those schools would better educate our children?
I believe, Phil, not necessarily a school. And what I'm doing is with testoutkids.com, I'm creating literacy centers so that you could deal, for instance, I create centers from ages 4 to 14. I want to go in churches, community centers, daycares, to make sure that the children are getting an intensive reading program. Because in the school, you already know the classrooms are oversized, especially in the urban classrooms. You have teachers who are burnt out. You don't have all bad teachers and all bad principals and all bad superintendents, but you have a large number of them. They're burnt out, and they're doing the best they can to survive and ends meet for themselves. So I believe in opening a smaller environment called a literacy center that will deal specifically with struggling readers and non-readers, because these are the children and especially the children who are not a behavior problem, they're the ones who slip through the cracks. In the school system, they either focus on the really smart kids, and they call those the bright kids. Those are the kids that get the extra work and get, the advanced courses. And then you either deal with the real low kids. Those are the special ed kids. They usually get shoved into emotional support classrooms. They're in classrooms where they have to have specifics in reading and in math. But once again, because it's an overload, because I know a district that has an overload of special ed kids, the special ed teacher does not get around to really doing one-on-one with that child. So that child gets promoted for being in special ed, but does not get the attention that they need. So the centers is an answer. It really can deal with intensive reading instruction and making sure that the child can get what they need. I've seen it happen. I see it happen on a daily basis, Phil.
So you talked about special education, and I remember when I was in school, they had the special ed class, and most of the special ed class was filled with black males. I didn't really see no black females. Why is it they always herding black males into special education classes?
I've spoken with a young man about that. He's in his 50s now, and he was in special ed, but they said he was extremely bad. But when it all boiled down to, he was very intelligent. So he was intimidating to the teachers. And so they, I've been there, I've seen it. They will write the child up as a behavior problem. And then they will specialize in giving them some type of reading assistance or some type of math assistance. So you get the majority of those kids and you put them in one classroom. I've been there, I've seen it. You put them in one classroom and you're going to have hell on your hands. Now, when they gave me the special ed kids, my focus on them was to teach them how to read. I had a young man in my 8th grade class. I'll never forget him. He reminded me about 2 or 3 years ago that they had me teaching algebra. I don't do algebra. I'm not an algebra teacher, but that's what they had me doing because that's what the district was doing. They were furloughing the teachers and then reassigning us. And so he destroyed my class. I found out, Phil, he couldn't read. So my thing was not to teach him algebra, which I didn't do very well with anyway. My thing was not to teach him algebra, but I taught him how to read. He reminded me, he graduated the whole 9 yards. He reminded me, he said, Miss Benjamin, you taught me how to read in the 8th grade. Well, that was the 8th grade. But Phil, we have to catch it before the 8th grade. Now, he was in special ed. He was in special ed for his behavior. But it really wasn't his behavior. It was his inability to read and to read on grade level. And this happens so many times and the parents don't read the IEPs, the individualized educational plan. They really don't read them. And then I've sat in the meetings when they go through those plans, they go through them so fast that the language sometimes is way above their heads. It's not that the parents are ignorant. It's not that they're stupid. But the explanation of it is way above their heads. And these people, I'm telling you, they're making money off of the ignorance and the dumbness of our children. The urban community gets a lot of money from the government, and all it does is keep our kids dumb. And I will not be a part of that anymore. I will not.
So basically what you're saying is, and I've always railed against the so-called education system. I feel it's more of an indoctrination system and not an education system, because you would care about kids not learning. I mean, that would be a stain against you. But you say literacy centers, and you feel that our children need to learn how to read. So, or is it a program that maybe somebody, a child, let's say right now is watching? You say, do you do it online as well?
We do it online. We have physical books. We do it. The bulk of it is online. It's a very, very intense program, and I train individuals. Phil, I went to my church. I told my church I will not pastor an illiterate church. And so everybody who had children in my church up to 14, their child or children had to be in my literacy center. Now, I upset people. I upset people all the time. But, this message is just not for everybody. And some people got mad at me. But in the long run, we found out that a lot of the kids, they were in school. Some of them were even in the suburbs. And they were just being passed through the system. Couldn't read, so I put them in my center. Now they're reading on grade level, and their goal, they have their own individual goals. as well as our corporate goals. Their goals now, I have two kids that tested, a third grade student who is now in the fourth grade and a fifth grade student who is now in the sixth grade, and they were proficient. When they came to me, they were reading well below their grade level, and with the intent of the school, hear me, Phil, to put them in special ed for behavior. And I told the mother exactly what to do. She did what I said. To this day, they're not in a behavior program. They're not in special ed. They're reading on grade level, and they're not very far from reading above grade level. So it really takes somebody who cares enough, because I'm really tired of hearing, well, send them to school because if nothing else, they're going to get something to eat. Phil, you can't eat for 7.5 hours. So,
Right.
so if you eat for that half hour, you get a half hour lunch. What are you doing with the other hours to ensure and assure that our children are reading on and above grade level without all of the excuses, without all of the hoopla? Yes, we got some parents that don't cooperate with us, but you still have them in that classroom for at least 7.5 hours, 5 days a week, void vacation. We still ought to be able to make an impact on our children in spite of all of the other malfeasance that take place, in spite of all the other things that say they can't learn. They can learn. I'm telling you, I know they can, because I do it. I'm doing it I'm working with a church now in the Bronx, New York, where they said that their children can read on grade level. I said, go back and check. Let me test them. And they called back and they said, okay, Dr. Benjamin, we need you to put together what we need to do. I said, get 10 kids. That's all you need, Phil. Just imagine, Phil, if we took 10 kids in maybe different parts of a community or of a city and made sure that they were proficient and or above grade level, we would be starting a reading revolution. We would be creating and changing the paradigm of education that you think that all they do is just pour stuff down your throat and tell you got to learn this and tell you got to learn stuff that's not even relevant to how they live and where they live. Tests they take that are just culturally biased. There's so much, and I believe that the starting point is to create literacy centers so that we could deal. I believe small is the new mega. Creating literacy centers that we can really address and eradicate illiteracy, because these kids gonna go to the public school. Not many of them can go to private school. And charter schools have a long waiting list. And then the charter schools are not doing as well as they should do either. So now we're creating another system that will deal with this situation firsthand.
So let me ask you a question. You made a statement that tests are culturally biased. Can you explain to me how are they culturally biased for people who don't know exactly how they are?
Well, when you're taking a test and most of our kids are in this city, and they don't deal with stuff, outside of the city. Most of the kids in the city very rarely even leave their local environment. And so the tests could be dealing with stuff that has nothing to do with city life, has nothing to do with how, with the Black culture altogether. Learning is standard, but you still have to present it in a way that a child can understand it. And when you understand it, that means that you can repeat it, you can regurgitate it, you can explain it. I looked at a test not too long ago, and I'm not going to name the test, but they had 5 options. Multiple choices, usually 4, and they had a 5th one, and the 5th one said no mistakes. So if the child can't read and they can't spell correctly, then their answer is going to be no mistakes, because they don't know what it is anyway. You understand what I'm saying? So they end up failing the test. I look at the results of the test, and the majority of our children fail in phonics, they fail in spelling, and they fail in comprehension. So what do? That's why I develop centers that deal specifically with comprehension, with the vocabulary, using the word in a sentence, and able to spell it and then able to explain it without technically going to the dictionary. Because I got to tell you something about the dictionary. They used the dictionary as a form of punishment for years. When a child wasn't doing right in the class, they would say, go sit down and write the words out of the dictionary. Or they use writing as a form of punishment. When I came into education, I stopped all that foolishness. You're not going to use writing as a form of punishment, because writing and reading go hand in hand. And so I stopped it. I had an alternative building, Phil. I had mostly boys from grades 3 to 8. And they said that these kids were the cream of the crop bad. Do you not know that those were some of the brightest kids? It's just that no one really took the time to really figure out and go and deal with their deficiencies, and then love on them and care for them and speak into them and show them that they could do it and show them that they could make it. That's what I do, Phil. And that's what I train people to do.
Well, from my experience in school and so on, I can say, and maybe you could correct me, that the teachers that I had that were black took more time with me and understood me and actually helped me way more than, I'm going to say, a lot of the Caucasian female teachers that I had in school. Now, do you feel that black teachers, of course, the ones that care, not the ones that just for a paycheck, if they care, do you think they actually get to the black kids better because they understand where they come from, understand their abilities, etc.?
Phil, that's an excellent question. And our kids need to see us in the education arena. I will not say that there are not white people who care, because I've had, being the top principal in the district, the highest paid, I've had black educators who were just as bad, that didn't show any care, brought kids in the class, gave them a paper, fill in the blanks, and sent them to the principal's office on a regular basis. If they got sent to my office, they got sent back, because I'm not the teacher in the classroom. They belong in your class. Figure out how to work with them. So I've had marginal black teachers, but I gotta say, overall, our children need to see their culture of people in the classroom. We need more blacks involved in education. We really do. We need more black males. And I know that it's not a high paid job. So then you do get more Caucasian young women. They come out of school, they go and they learn in the urban communities. They learn there. And then they go back to their communities. They get their school loans, their college loans paid off, and it leaves the relationships with our children empty, because our children operate strongly off a relationship, Phil, and you know that. It takes a village to raise a child. So we have aunts and uncles and big mamas and grandpops, and they're all involved in this. Even the neighborhood. My neighborhood, when I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York, everybody knew about the Benjamins, and everybody knew about me. We knew about each other, and they supported my mom and dad. We were supportive. So we do need more blacks in education, but they too they gotta look at themselves too and realize, am I in this for real, or am I in this just to be in this? Because I'm in this for real, Phil. I am. I've not been, in the system, so therefore I don't receive a paycheck like you would think I would receive a paycheck, and my church doesn't technically support me just yet. So I have been giving of myself and of my own money to see that these children are properly taught how to read. And then I go across the country with this film. I'm talking to whomever will listen to me, that we have the power to change the paradigm of education by creating smaller environments of learning for our children that is firmly undergirded in literacy.
Well, you mentioned about the support of your church. Me personally, and I have just my thoughts on that, is I don't really believe that some people deserve support, but you're doing the work. And it's okay to give and help people doing the work to help our kids, because this system's not going to do it. Like you said, the kids in the system is going to just put them in special ed. They're going to pass them. They're not going to know anything. And this translates with the reading into math, because black people a lot of times struggle with math. And what you find out with that, if you can't read, then you can't read the examples of how to do the math problems.
You're exactly right, because I hear parents say, well, my child is a little better in math, but math, listen, numbers are words. And so if you can extract from, you're right, if you cannot extract from the question, what it, whether it's some type of order of operation, or how you're supposed to, whether you're dealing with math, dealing with adding or subtraction, and the kids get frustrated with that. So if you cannot do that well, they say, well, he's good with numbers. Numbers are words. Phil, I had a young man who was suspended every week. From the fifth grade. I had him from the fifth grade. His mother's in my church, and is a big kid. And he was suspended. He was placed in partial for mental illness, the whole 9 yards. And he tore up classrooms. I'm telling you, he tore up classrooms. And I went and visited one day, and he didn't know I was there, and he was tearing up the classroom, and I was walking down the hall. And I left my building to go attend to one of my members' child, and come to find out, he really could read on grade level, but there was no challenge in the class. So because he was in emotional support, he tore up the classroom. So they never dealt with the fact that he was reading on grade level, so I tested him. He was in the fifth grade. He was reading on a seventh grade level. So I told his mother, he's going to be the first one in my center. He was the first one in my center. Phil, I promise you, from grade 5 to grade 8, he just entered into the ninth grade. He's been reading on a high 12th grade level. He was not suspended anymore once I focused on his strength. Now, math was a complete weakness for him because he didn't like math. But when I worked with him, spelling, he this is amazing. He's like an anomaly. He couldn't spell well. He couldn't write a sentence in one line. This kid is what you call a prime example of creating a smaller environment for him and focusing on his strength as well as his weaknesses. He's in the ninth grade now. So he's in ROTC, and his mother, of course you have the high school woes, but he's doing fairly well.
That's great to hear. So from what I'm gathering about from the conversation is, when it comes to our child's education, I feel number one, parental involvement is at least 50 to 60% of it. And the reason why I can say that, because my daughters at one point in time was struggling, especially with math. And we got them to go to a local tutor for about 9 months. And that's all it took, was 9 months. And now they turned themselves around. I got one daughter in college, the other daughter that's in 10th grade. She's a A and B student, which she never was before. But it's like when she got math, it's like everything for her turned around. And you have to be on those teachers. You have to sometimes pay for extra tutoring or send your kids to literacy classes or whatever extra that you have to do so your children can pass. Because like you said earlier, some people want the schoolhouse to babysit their children so they can go to work or etc. instead of educating their children.
Phil, I always told the educators with my son, he's 29 now, he's a head chef in a restaurant. And he did not go to school for culinary arts, but I made sure that he could read and do math on a very high level. And I always told him, I said, listen, 75 to 80% of his education is on me. And you have the other 25 to 30%. So I'm going to be here. I'm going to be a thorn in your flesh. I was all the way till he graduated high school. I was always there. But you don't have parents who see the value of getting involved. You're right. For some parents, school is just another babysitting job. It's just another place to have the child until they come home. And then some kids are home by themselves. And so we have to look at other systems, create other systems that will address the deficiency in our communities, because we have some very smart children. We have some very innovative children. And like your daughters, all you need to do is get them the help. That's why I do the literacy centers. Send them to the literacy centers. If they can't read, I take kindergarten students in. I take in first grade students. I go to churches. I talk to pastors. One of the key places that you can put this is in the church. You already have the children in the church. Children go to church all the time. You already have it. A key place, a community center, a Y. I went to the Y, and they said, well, we have second and third grades, and they barely can read. So I said, I will test them for free. Just give me one child and one parent, because when I test the children, the parent must be in the test. Reason being, so that the parent can see what their child can do, the frustration that their child go through when they cannot read on their grade level. And I still haven't heard back from the Y, but you're going to tell me that the majority of your second and third graders cannot read on grade level, and all you can provide is another basketball game or another football game. Phil, I don't have a problem with sports. I grew up in sports. I could have gone to college on a sports scholarship, but I didn't. But the game comes to an end. It does. The season comes to an end. Just imagine all of our millionaire men that struggled, lost all their money because they didn't understand what the contract read. They didn't read what was in the contract, and they lost money. They lost dignity. They lost pride. Just imagine the colleges that create courses to put our black men in. There's no course, there's no teacher. They're investigating these universities now. But, instead of running after the money, we got to change the mindset. The concept and the idea. Reading is not hard to teach. And our children can learn. You just got to have a heart. That's why I told you, this is what I do. I'm going to do this until the Lord calls me home. I'm going to do this. I do it out of my church. I'm doing it out of other churches. I'm talking with people in North Carolina. I'm talking with folks in New York. I'm talking with the organization that I'm connected with, the church organization. I'm telling them every one of the churches need to have a literacy center because they're not all in the same state. So you need to have a literacy center in your church. This is how we change the paradigm of education. And we don't have to call and depend on the government. The government gives us money, Phil, because, the urban schools will report we made 10% gain. Well, what happened to the other 90%? There's 90% failure. So you make 10%, 15% gain, they give you money to do what? Because the focus is not on reading. I know it's not. I spoke to someone, a leader of a district, and she said, I'm trying to build the morale of my teachers. And I understand that. I said, but your kids can't read. The response was, I know. But if you know it and you don't do anything about it, that's the problem, Phil. That's what we're really dealing with.
Well, in most professions, if you aren't doing your job, you're usually fired. So Absolutely. It's amazing how they're not doing their jobs, and they acknowledge they're not doing their jobs, and yet they still get to stay in their contracts. That is really amazing that they can get away with that. So you said that you connected with different churches. Are you connected with churches down south? Because the majority of black people is in the South anyway.
I would love to connect with churches down south. Right now I'm just talking with one entity in I want to say North Carolina, and I just made contact with someone in Atlanta. I would love to talk to churches from down south. My family roots are down south, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia. So I'm a city girl. I'm from Mount Vernon, New York. But I would love to talk to churches down south. Every church does not have to incorporate this, but if you could get churches to understand, to come together and say, okay, these three churches have it, so we don't have enough kids to have it. We'll send our kids over there. Because you could start with 10 kids, 8 to 10 kids, Phil. That's why I'm dealing with a church right now in the Bronx. They call it the Boogie Down Bronx. I'm dealing with a church in the Bronx. I said, start with 8 to 10 kids. They have an education department. Why have an education department and not address education? Well, Phil, education is really a loaded word. Curriculum, those are loaded words. We get over on using those words. But how about creating an environment that will deal specifically with intensive reading instruction? I don't expect children to come out of school to be rocket scientists and mathematicians and all that, but I do expect them by the 12th grade, that's 13 years, kindergarten to 12 is 13 years, to be able to read on or above grade level. Not read and never made it past the first year of college. They went on scholarships for sports, but they didn't make it.
Yeah, and for me, I'm just not going to allow that. Like I say, my kids, and I made sure that I told them in this house, education is very important. Your daddy will support you all the way up. At least you get your bachelor's degree, and if you decide to go on, then we can revisit that conversation. But Dr. Benjamin, can you give us the website for people that's watching to say, you know what, I want to get my kids tested, or I want to join this program? There's people actually all over the world that watch our program. I was just doing a live stream the other night, and you had a brother in Uganda watching. So can you give us the website? That way people all over the world that watch could possibly test their kids if they're interested.
Yes, the website is Test Our Kids. Test, TEST, Our, OUR, Kids, KIDS.com. Now, Yusuf Salam, the one who set up this interview with you today, with you and myself today, he heads that up. And usually you could get in touch with him. He'll be able to give you information, more information even about me, because I am a proponent of using Test Our Kids program as the foundation of my literacy centers. And so I promote Test Our Kids. I'm a promoter for Test Our Kids. I recommend it very strongly. And if you need me to come in and help you establish your reading and your literacy or reading centers, however you want to call them, I am available to come in to help you get established, to help you bring in your facilitators, because I train people. I train people in my church. I tell them, you don't need degrees. I got all the degrees, man. I have the bachelor's, and I have 2 masters, and I have the doctorate. I have all the degrees. I need people with a desire who want to transform lives of children, because it's not happening, Phil, in the public school. So we got to make it happen. And so testoutkids.com, you could go on there. There's phone numbers that you can reach Yusuf Salam, that you and then if there's any more, if you need me to come in, he will arrange that and set that up where I can come in and get you started, because I'm your girl for this. I know I am. I left 6 figures to deal with this. I could just be collecting a paycheck too, Phil, paying my bills. God is good. He's taking care of me. I have no complaints. But I left it to deal with an injustice. And the injustice is our kids cannot read. And they're going to end up in jail greater than it's ever been, or either dead. Every time they talk about a murder, I always wonder in my mind, I wonder if we test these kids, where would they fit in the scheme of things? You understand what I'm saying? If we tested all these pregnancies, because pregnancy, they used to call it teen. It's preteen now. It's not just teen. It's preteen. I'm dealing with people who say, well, I'm dealing with this. How do I deal with this? Teach these kids how to read. That's the initial move right there. Then we can start talking about some of the other things that we want to deal with, some of the other enrichments and some of the other amenities that we want to give to our children. Teach them how to read. It's going to save their lives.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So, Dr. Benjamin, I definitely thank you for joining us on the show today. It was great to speak to you. And guys, if you are interested, make sure to go to testourkids.com.
Yes.
And make sure to get your kids tested, and let's see where they're at. If they are not where they need to be, don't feel bad. You can always correct that, and that's what it's about. So, Dr. Benjamin, thank you for sharing us the information today.
Thank you, Phil, for having me.
All right. All right, Dr. Benjamin, I definitely appreciate